Okay, so the example here is saying, I'm just going to move this slightly. The question is saying find the absolute max and min of this function here on this interval. So they're giving you an interval. They'll always give you an interval if they want anything to do with absolute max mins. By the way, I didn't mention this earlier, but you can use the word local interchangeably with the word relative. So a function, a point that's like a local max, you can also call that point like a relative max. And you might see the word global and the word absolute being interchanged. Okay, so these two kind of mean the same thing. If you hear the word absolute or global, they mean the same thing. Global max, absolute max, same thing. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. Absolute max just means global max and min, okay, for this function. Okay, let's first find the derivative. So this one's easy to do. It's 3x squared minus 12x plus 0. And then let's factor out what's common. So what's common is 3 and an x. So we have x minus 4. And then I'm just going to make a sign chart. Now when I make my sign chart, I'm just going to be wary of this interval. Okay, so I'm only going to make a sign chart from -2 to 5. And I'm just going to ignore the rest. Like I just don't care about those values. Okay, and then if we look at the derivative, we can see the derivative is going to be 0 when x is 0. Okay, that's from here. And we can also see the derivative is going to be 0 when x is 4. Okay, so like that. Here, 0, here, 0. And then what you need to do is test the value between -2 and 0, maybe -1. If you plug in -1 here, you get negative times a negative. That's going to be a positive. If you test the value between 0 and 4, like 1, you get negative, positive, that's negative. And then between 4 and 5, you can test like 4.5 or something. It's going to be positive, positive. It's going to be positive. Okay. Also, actually, you can see that much more easily if you just recognize that this is a parabola that opens up and it has two real roots. The parabola will be negative between the roots and positive outside the roots. Okay. So there's your sign chart. And from the sign chart, you can actually create a rough sketch. Maybe the graph starts like here, increases, increases, decreases, 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 and then increases. Now, what I'm trying to illustrate with this sign chart, maybe I'll keep going there. Okay. What I'm trying to illustrate with this sign chart is that it's kind of hard. Like it's hard to tell if this thing is the global maximum or absolute maximum or this thing. It's like we're not sure. There's not enough information with just the signs to be able to determine whether this local maximum happens to be the absolute maximum or whether this endpoint is the maximum. It's very hard to tell. In the same way, it's hard to tell if the starting point here is the absolute minimum or this local minimum down here is the local absolute minimum. So the way that we figure these questions out, it's always the same way. What we do is we make a table. I'm going to do that now. And in your table, you just want an x column and a y column. Your x values, what we're going to do is we're going to list the stationary values, so 0 and 4, but we're also going to list the endpoint values, -2 and 5. Okay, so I'm going to do x equals -2. And that is an endpoint. Maybe I'll actually make a note of that. So this is an endpoint. That's why we need to include it in our chart. We have x equals 0, which is a stationary point, x equals 4, which is a stationary point, and then 5. And 5 is also another endpoint. And you have to include, when you're dealing with absolute maximums and minimums on an interval, you have to include the endpoints. Okay, so let's find the y values. So if we find the y values, we get -2 cubed minus 6, -2 squared plus 5. I'm going to erase this. So -2 cubed is just -8. -2 squared is 4. 4 times -6 is -24 plus 5. So you get -32 plus 5. It's going to be -27. Okay, so the y value here is -27 when the x value is -2. In the same way, and you can use a calculator if you want to compute these values. I have these values written down. So the y value here is easy to figure out. That's just 5. When x is 4, the y value is -27 again. When x is 5, the y value is -20. Okay, and you can compute those on a calculator or by hand, whatever you want. Okay, so the important thing is they want us to find the absolute max and mins. Okay, and the way you do that is really simple. To find the absolute maximum, let's do that first. You just find the highest y value. Okay, so the highest, and we have negative 27, 5, negative 27, negative 20. This is the highest y value. So that's the largest y value that the curve achieves in this interval. So we can just circle this thing, and we can say, we can say 0, 5 is the absolute max, or the global max. Okay, and then you'll notice something when we're looking for the absolute min. This negative 27 and this negative 27 match up, and they're the same value, and they also happen to be the lowest y value, or the smallest y value. So here, something interesting, I guess, will happen. We'll do this in a different color. Negative 27 and negative 20 will both be, negative 27 and this negative 27 will both be the absolute minimums. Okay, so we're going to have 2 points that are absolute minimums. So we're going to have negative 2 comma negative 27 and 4 comma negative 27. These are both absolute mins, okay, or absolute minimums. So hopefully that makes sense. I feel like this concept's not so difficult. All you need to do is find the first derivative, set it equal to 0, find the stationary points, also look at the endpoints, make a table like this, and then find what the highest and smallest value, the smallest and largest value in that for those critical points are. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, please send me an email, ask a friend, do whatever you need to. It's very important that you're asking questions and kind of getting through the questions as we work online. It's a lot harder for me to see how you're progressing, so it's important to reach out when you're not sure how to do something. I'm going to give you guys about 3 questions or so to do. For the rest of the period, you can work on that. Okay, have a good rest of your day. Stay safe.